Hello. Now we're going to look at U.S. History, Chapter 14, the U.S. in World War II, Section 6, World War II Ends. Our learning objectives are to explain how the Allies defeated Germany to end the war in Europe. So, after winning the Battle of the Bulge, Germany had few soldiers left to defend its homeland. Germany faced 4 million Allied troops on its western border and millions more Soviet troops to the east. The Big Three, Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin, met in Yalta to make plans for the end of the war and the peace that was to follow. Allied forces made their way across the Rhine River, which was a key barrier to the center of Germany. Roosevelt decided to leave Berlin to the Soviets. In April of 1945, Hitler realized that the war was lost and committed suicide inside his Berlin bunker. The Yalta Conference. The Allied leaders, Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin, the so-called Big Three, met in the resort town of Yalta in the Soviet Union to discuss the end of the war and the peace that was to follow. A key goal was to determine what to do with Germany. The leaders agreed to divide the country into 4 sectors. The Americans, Soviets, British, and French would each occupy one of these sectors. Berlin was also divided into 4 sectors. Another agreement had to do with the fate of Poland and other Eastern European countries now occupied by the Soviets. Stalin agreed to hold elections in these countries after the war. This is a promise, of course, that he would end up breaking. Stalin also said that the Soviet Union would declare war on Japan 3 months after Germany was defeated. Here's a quick look at the Yalta, or quick summary of the Yalta and Potsdam conferences. So once again, at the Yalta Conference, they agreed on a new United Nations peacekeeping organization that would replace the League of Nations. They agreed upon a divided Germany and free elections in several Eastern European nations. Then later at the Potsdam Conference, they met for 17 days, discussed post-war resolutions, and talked about the atomic bomb. So, winning the war in Europe. First, let's look at crossing the Rhine. This was a key point. Hitler ordered his troops to make a stand at the Rhine River. Despite the fact that the Germans blew up many of the bridges across the Rhine to slow the Allies, they managed to cross at Remagen. The decision to defend the river turned out to be one of Hitler's military mistakes. The Berlin question. Some Allied leaders wanted to capture Berlin before the Soviets did. Eisenhower decided not to try to get to Berlin before the Soviets, partially because he believed the battle for Berlin would be bloody, and also because the Allied leaders had already agreed on how to divide Berlin. Thus, he couldn't see the justification in trying to beat the Soviets there. Why not let the Soviets take the city and take the casualties, since we'd already agreed on how to divide the city? Now looking at Hitler's death. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler realized that all hope for a German victory was lost, and he committed suicide in his Berlin bunker. At least this is the official story. Some question it. There are some theories out there that suggest that possibly he escaped and faked his own death, but the general accepted belief is that Hitler perished. Berlin surrendered on May 2nd, 1945. Karl Dönitz, who had taken over as Germany's leader, agreed to a surrender on May 7th, in which would take place the following day. In the United States, May 8th was proclaimed VE Day, for Victory in Europe Day. Our next learning objective is to explain the Allied plans to defeat Japan and the justification for the use of the atomic bomb. So, winning the war in the Pacific, the cost of capturing Okinawa were high. We had high rates of battle-related psychological casualties. Thousands suffered from battle fatigue and other disorders, commonly what we would now refer to as PTSD. Many dreaded the possibility of invading the major islands of Japan. General MacArthur and Admiral Nimitz developed plans for a massive invasion of Japan. A new bombing tactic was used on Japanese cities, one designed to produce tremendous firestorms in the bombed area. Some Japanese leaders began to see the need for peace and began to contact the Soviet Union. President Harry S. Truman decided to drop an atomic bomb on Japan. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. Now, those are some generalities. So let's look more at the specifics. First of all, looking at the atomic bomb. Harry S. Truman became president when Roosevelt died. He had to decide whether the United States should use the Manhattan Project's atomic bomb. After consulting with his advisors, Truman decided to drop the bomb on a Japanese city. There would be no warning. Now keep in mind, too, that Truman had largely been out of the loop in the Roosevelt administration. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt had been president. Truman was not necessarily up to speed on everything that was going on in the country. So being that he had kind of been left out of the loop, he was completely unaware that we had developed this new bomb until he became president. Now he has to make the choice. Does he use this bomb? Ultimately, it was decided that he should, because the argument was made that it was going to save many lives. It would save Japanese lives as well as many American lives that would be lost in trying to capture mainland Japan. So, on August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay dropped its atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. Despite the horror caused by the bomb, the Japanese did not surrender. So on August 9th, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Nagasaki. Even this did not bring an end to the war. Finally, on August 15th, known from then on as VJ Day for victory over Japan, Japanese Emperor Hirohito announced the end of the war.